Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. We all learn in school that Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492, right? It's a cornerstone of history. But what if I told you that story is incomplete? What if I told you that another explorer from a land of ice and fire set foot on American soil almost 500 years before Columbus was even born? Today, we're diving into the incredible, often overlooked story of Leif Erikson, the Norse explorer who might be the true first European to reach the Americas. Forget what you think you know, because we're about to rewrite a famous chapter of history. Our story begins around the year 1000. While much of Europe was in the midst of the Middle Ages, the Vikings, or Norsemen, were the undisputed masters of the sea. These weren't just raiders. They were expert navigators, traders, and settlers. Leif's own father, the famously hot-tempered Eric the Red, had already established Norse settlements in Greenland after being exiled from Iceland. So, Leif grew up on the very edge of the known world, staring out at the vast, mysterious ocean to the west. The primary sources for these voyages are the Icelandic sagas, specifically the saga of the Greenlanders and the saga of Eric the Red. Now, it's important to remember these were originally oral histories, written down centuries later. They're filled with heroic deeds, family feuds, and dramatic flair. For a long time, historians viewed them as epic literature, not as factual accounts. They were the Game of Thrones of their day. The idea of Vikings in America seemed like pure fantasy. According to the saga of the Greenlanders, Leif Erikson didn't set out to find a new continent. He was sailing from Norway back to Greenland when his ship was blown off course by a fierce storm. When the skies cleared, he and his crew sighted an unknown land, lush with grapevines, self-sown wheat, and massive timber. Intrigued by this bounty, Leif named it Vinland, or Wineland. Imagine their surprise. They were used to the harsh, nearly treeless landscapes of Greenland and Iceland. To find a place so green and fertile must have felt like stumbling into paradise. They built a small settlement, explored the area, and spent the winter there before sailing back to Greenland with a ship full of timber and grapes, a cargo worth a fortune. The other version, from the saga of Eric the Red, gives the credit for the initial sighting to another merchant named Bjarni Herjolfsson, who was blown off course years earlier but didn't land. In this telling, an inspired Leif Erikson bought Bjarni's ship and intentionally mounted an expedition to find this mysterious new land. Whether it was by accident or on purpose, the sagas agree on one thing. Leif Erikson and his Norse crew established a temporary camp in North America. For decades, this story remained just that, a story. A captivating myth. But that all changed in the 1960s. In a remote corner of Newfoundland, Canada, at a place called Lance aux Meadows, archaeologists Helga and Stein Ingstad made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the historical community. They unearthed the remains of a Norse settlement. They found turf-walled longhouses, a forge for working iron, and artifacts like a bronze ring-headed pin and a soapstone spindle whorl, all undeniably Norse in origin. And the dating? Carbon dating placed the settlement squarely in the 11th century, right around the year 1000, perfectly matching the timeline of the sagas. This was it. This was the physical proof. The myth was real. Lance aux Meadows was the first confirmed European settlement in the Americas, predating Columbus by nearly 5 centuries. Vinland was found. This discovery proved that the Vikings didn't just reach America, they lived there, at least for a short time. The settlement at Lance aux Meadows appears to have been a base camp, a place for repairing ships and processing resources like lumber and bog iron before heading back to Greenland. So why didn't the Norse settlements last? Why did Columbus get all the credit? Well, unlike the later European colonization, the Norse presence was tiny. We're talking about a few dozen people, not fleets of ships with thousands of settlers. Their supply lines back to Greenland were stretched incredibly thin. More importantly, they weren't arriving in an empty land. The sagas speak of encounters with the native inhabitants, whom the Norse called Skrælings. While some encounters were initially based on trade, they quickly soured and became violent. The Norse, with their small numbers, were at a serious disadvantage so far from home. Facing a hostile population and with a tenuous link to Greenland, they eventually decided the venture wasn't worth the risk. They packed up and sailed away, leaving Vinland to fade back into legend. Because their settlement failed, and because the knowledge of this land wasn't widely disseminated across Europe, the discovery was effectively forgotten by the rest of the world. It remained a story known only to the Icelanders. When Columbus sailed, he wasn't following a Norse map. He was working off his own theories. His voyage had a permanent, world-altering impact, connecting the two hemispheres in a way the Norse voyage never did. That's why his name is the one we remember. Now, Leif Erikson might be the most well-documented case, but was he the only one? The idea of pre-Columbian contact is a hotbed of fascinating and sometimes wild theories. One of the most talked about is the 1421 theory, which proposes that a massive Chinese treasure fleet, commanded by Admiral Zheng He, not only sailed to America, but circumnavigated the globe decades before Magellan. This theory is captivating. Zheng He's fleets were a marvel of naval engineering, far larger and more advanced than anything in Europe at the time. The idea of these colossal ships reaching the Americas is mind-boggling. However, unlike the Norse sagas, which are now backed by archaeology, there is no credible historical or archaeological evidence to support the claim that Zheng He's fleet reached the Americas. The theory is largely based on interpretations of ancient maps that most mainstream historians dispute. It's a fantastic what-if scenario, but for now, it remains firmly in the realm of speculation, not accepted history. There are other theories, too, about ancient Romans, Polynesians, or Africans reaching the Americas. Most lack the kind of concrete proof we see at L'Anse aux Meadows. What this all shows us is that the ocean wasn't a barrier, it was a highway. And humans have always been driven by curiosity and a desire to see what's over the horizon. So, who discovered America? The answer is more complex than a single name. The first discoverers were, of course, the indigenous peoples who migrated from Asia thousands of years ago and built complex civilizations. But when it comes to a European presence, the evidence points overwhelmingly to Leif Erikson. His journey was a testament to Norse courage and seamanship. While Columbus's voyage changed the world forever, Leif Erikson's forgotten voyage is a crucial piece of the puzzle, a historical bombshell that forces us to rethink the timeline we thought we knew. He was the Viking who stood on American shores, a forgotten explorer who beat Columbus by 500 years. What do you think? Should Leif Erikson be as famous as Christopher Columbus? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into hidden history, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives. We'll see you in the next one.